Spartacus killed characters the way Rome killed people, efficiently, publicly, and with purpose. Across 4 seasons, this show buried more named characters than almost anything on television. Some died in the arena with a sword in their chest. Some died in bedchambers with a secret in their throat. Some died holding a weapon. Some died holding the person they loved. But which deaths were the most brutal? Not the bloodiest. Blood is cheap in this show. The ones you still feel on the 5th rewatch, even though you know exactly what's coming. And the most brutal death on this entire list? It doesn't have a single drop of blood worth remembering. What it has is worse. Far worse. Sedulus. Not a gladiator. Not a warrior. A thug who joined the rebellion and mistook chaos for permission, and learned the difference with his face. Celtic brute who shows up in vengeance. Muscle without code. When he tries to force himself on Naevia, assaults one of the rebellion's own, he crosses the one line Spartacus draws in blood, not a line in sand, a line in bone. Spartacus doesn't fight Sedulus, he unmakes him. Fist, fist again, blade. Face opens like wet clay. Spartacus didn't just kill Sedulus, he announced that even rebellion has laws, and he's the one who writes them in other men's blood. Every rebel watching learned something. This army is not a mob. It belongs to someone. That's rage. That's personal. The arena turned it into something worse, a business model. Theokoles, the shadow of death. Undefeated, unscarred by fear. The only opponent in the entire show who made the arena feel like what it always was underneath the spectacle. A place specifically built for men to die inside. Gladiators whisper his name. Euonymus flinches when he hears it. By the time Theokoles appears on screen, massive, scarred beyond recognition, something behind those eyes that stopped being human long ago, you already know. This isn't a fighter. This is an extinction event with a pulse. Betrayals gambles everything, sends Spartacus and Crixus together. 2 men who despise each other forced to cooperate against a myth who has killed every champion before them. Theokoles shreds them. Crixus goes down hard. Spartacus is alone, bleeding. One swing from death. But watch how he survives. Not strength. Adaptation. He reads Theokoles the way a lockpick reads a door. Finds the gap. Exploits the weakness no one else dared to look for because they were too busy being terrified. That's not just combat. That's the mind of a man who survives systems by understanding them from inside. The kill comes drenched in rain and blood. Spartacus barely standing, arms spread, the arena erupts. The bringer of rain is born, a slave reborn as myth in a single frame. If that image existed in Game of Thrones, it'd be tattooed on 1,000,000 arms by now. But because it's Spartacus, nobody talks about it. Theokoles dies, and the myth of the unbeatable gladiator dies with him. But something else cracks. Spartacus and Crixus, forced to save each other, stop being enemies. Not yet brothers, but fractured enough to become them. That's the arena at its loudest. But for the people nobody was watching, death came quieter. And worse. Everything until now has been blood. The deaths that come next don't need a weapon. They just need a system that treats human beings as furniture. The deaths nobody remembers. Petros, Barsa's lover. A boy, barely more than a boy, who survived the ludus by staying invisible, until Asher's scheming murdered the only person who protected him. After Barsa's death, Petros is given to Neus, a gladiator who brutalizes and repeatedly assaults him. The show doesn't dramatize this for spectacle, it shows the aftermath. Petros shrinking, eyes emptying, a person disappearing inside his own skin, and then he jumps, from the ludus balcony, quietly, while no one was watching. DeKnight put this death in the show to prove the ludus didn't just kill with swords, it killed with indifference. Petros wasn't a gladiator, wasn't Roman, wasn't anything to anyone with power, and Barsa was gone. The worst part? You almost didn't notice him either. That guilt is the point. Diona, Naevia's closest friend, a slave girl whose only crime was being beautiful in a house where beauty was inventory. She's sent to serve Tullius's men in Gods of the Arena. What they do to her is never fully shown. The Diona who comes back is not the Diona who left. Broken, hollow. She tries to stab a Roman in a moment of desperate defiance, and the system punishes her instantly. Condemned to die in the arena. as entertainment, a warm-up act before the real fights. Theokoles died a legend. Diona died as intermission. And that contrast is the show's thesis about who matters and who doesn't. Diona's death didn't just kill Diona, it killed the last soft part of Naevia, and 3 more seasons proved. Licinia, cousin to Marcus Crassus, a Roman noblewoman who came to the ludus to bed a gladiator and never left alive. Lucretia arranges for wealthy Roman women to use gladiators privately. Bodies as product. When Licinia threatens to expose the scheme, Lucretia murders her in the same room where intimacy was being sold minutes earlier. Body hidden, crime buried. Lucretia didn't just kill to protect a secret. She proved that in Rome, a woman's power lives between the bedroom and the blade, and she'd use both without hesitation. Licinia's disappearance reshapes the war seasons later. 3 deaths the system didn't blink at. But the worst death on this list works the same way. Someone disposable, and the person holding the blade is the last person who should be. We'll get there. The women the system swallowed. Melita, wife of Eunomaus. The woman whose death cracked 2 men open so deep the wound bled through the rest of the series. In Gods of the Arena, Lucretia forces Melita and Gannicus together. What begins as obedience becomes real feeling, and the guilt of that feeling becomes the defining wound of both men's lives. Melita dies from poisoned wine meant for Tullius, not for her. Collateral damage in a power play she didn't even know was happening. She doesn't die fighting. She doesn't die in the arena. She dies because she drank from the wrong cup at the wrong moment of someone else's war. But here's the cruelest part. It isn't the poison. It's that Melita dies without knowing the 2 men who loved her most would spend the rest of their lives destroying each other over what happened in this house. She dies thinking things might be okay. They never are. Sura, Spartacus's wife. The only person in his world who was supposed to be untouchable. And that's exactly why Betrayals reached for her. Everything Spartacus does in the arena, he does for one promise: seeing Sura again. Betrayals dangles her. Win enough and I'll reunite you. Spartacus believes it because he has to. Sura arrives at the ludus, wounded, barely alive. She dies in his arms. Betrayals says bandits on the road. The show confirms later what we already suspected. He ordered the killing himself. She was never supposed to arrive alive. Betrayals didn't just kill Sura. He killed her slowly, on a road, far from anyone who loved her, then delivered the body like a gift. I grieve with you, Spartacus. The words of a man who hired the knife and held the funeral. This death creates everything. The rebellion, the war. Every drop of Roman blood across 4 seasons flows from this one act. Sura didn't start the revolution. Her murder did. Mira, a slave who became a fighter, loved a man who couldn't love her back, and died proving her devotion was real. Mira fights beside Spartacus through the rebellion, but Spartacus, still carrying Sura's ghost, can never fully return what she gives. She knows. She stays anyway. During a battle, an axe thrown at Spartacus. Mira sees it. She moves. The throw, the impact. Mira on the ground, Spartacus turning, too late. She dies looking at the man who could never quite see her, and in that final moment, he finally does. Honestly, Mira deserved better. Better from Spartacus, better from the story, better from all of it. Her last act was saving a man who couldn't give her what she needed. That's not heroism. That's the knife twisting one more turn. Melita, poisoned by someone else's war. Sura, murdered by the man who promised to bring her home. Mira, killed saving someone who couldn't love her back. 3 women, 3 poisons. Same system. This show did something with women's deaths no other series has attempted. It didn't kill them for shock or motivation. It killed them as indictments. Of every system that treats people as consumable, most shows use women's deaths as male character fuel. Spartacus used them as evidence, and this show gets dismissed as blood and boobs? That's the crime. Everything until now was Rome working on people with no power. The deaths that come next? The machine eating its own. The people who built the machine, pulled into the gears.
Provenant de chez toi. What?
Asher, the snake with the limp, the smartest person in the ludus, and the living proof that intelligence without power is just suffering that knows its own name. He didn't become a villain because he was born one. The Ludus told him a gladiator with a broken leg was worthless. The Brotherhood, Crixus, Barca, the champions, looked at him and decided he didn't count. So Asher decided to become something they couldn't ignore. Even if that something was a monster, every betrayal, every scheme, every knife slid into someone else's back traces to that moment. Naevia kills him. Vengeance finale. Not cleanly, not with precision, messy, furious, multiple strikes. The camera holds and doesn't flinch. But watch Asher's face in those final seconds. That's not surprise. That's recognition. He played every angle the system offered and ran out of road. Somewhere inside, he always knew this was how it ended for someone like him. I hated Asher for 3 straight seasons. Then I rewatched the show and realized the Ludus made him doesn't make him forgivable. Makes his death sadder than I wanted it to be. And the cost isn't his, it's Naevia's. This kill changes her. The softness dies on that floor. She becomes harder, colder, and never fully comes back. The price of Asher's death is paid by the woman who swung the blade.
Very well.
Betrayals. Lanista, owner of champions. The man who built the greatest gladiator house in Capua and burned it to the ground with his own ambition, without ever realizing he was holding the match. Betrayals is the engine of blood and sand. Charismatic, funny, genuinely entertaining. You enjoy watching him the way you enjoy watching a shark, with fascination and a safe distance you don't actually have. And that's the trap. DeKnight designed him to be likable on purpose, because the audience enjoying a slave owner is exactly what the in-universe arena crowds are doing. You're entertained by a man who buys, sells, and kills human property. You don't realize it until the rebellion erupts. Jupiter's cock, iconic, beloved. But listen to how Betrayals talks. Every sentence assumes ownership over his gladiators, his wife, his world. His language is the system. The blood and sand finale. The rebellion detonates. The Ludus becomes an abattoir. Spartacus corners Betrayals. The sword goes in. But rewatch his face. That's not fear, it's betrayal. In his genuinely broken mind, he gave Spartacus everything. A name, a title. The crowds roar. He dies without understanding why his property would do this. That inability to see human beings as human beings in your final breath is the most brutally Roman moment in the series. Spartacus didn't just kill Betrayals, he killed the only version of the world Betrayals knew how to live in. Built an empire on gladiator blood. Gladiator blood tore it apart. Freedom without a map is chaos with a better name. The rebels have no plan, no supplies, no army. Every death in Vengeance traces back to this liberation that came with no instructions. The deaths that follow don't just hurt the characters, they hurt the show itself. And somewhere in the next 5 is the one I told you about, the one with no blood worth remembering. Oinomaus, Doctore. If the Ludus had a spine, he was it. The man who built every champion Betrayals ever paraded, and the first thing to break when the foundation turned out to be rotten. He built his entire identity on loyalty. Then he discovers the affair between Gannicus and Melita. The truth doesn't wound him, it dismantles him. Everything he believed, marriage, brotherhood, purpose, was constructed on a lie. Watch how it changes the way he fights. Oinomaus moves with perfect discipline, every strike measured, nothing wasted. Control isn't a style for him, it's the last wall standing between the man he believes himself to be and the rubble underneath. When that wall cracks, when he fights with rage instead of precision, you're not watching a man lose a fight, you're watching a man lose himself. Oinomaus dies in battle during Vengeance, fighting, leading, one last time. His death isn't sudden, it's earned. He's been carrying shattered faith for 2 seasons. When the end comes, there's a strange relief. Not for the viewer, for him. Oinomaus didn't die in that battle. He died the moment he learned the truth. Everything after was his body catching up. When he falls, the rebellion loses its compass. And Gannicus has to keep living knowing his brother went to his grave with that wound still open. No forgiveness spoken, just absence. Oinomaus carried honor to his grave. The next man on this list never got one. Rome made sure of that. Crixus, the undefeated Gaul, champion of Capua, a man who confused the arena's approval with his own worth, and only discovered who he really was after the crowd stopped cheering. By War of the Damned, Crixus is unrecognizable, not just a fighter anymore. A brother, a leader. His arc, from a man who needed the roar to feel alive, to a man willing to die for something no crowd would ever cheer for, is the show's most complete transformation. But Crixus and Spartacus disagree. Crixus wants to march on Rome. Spartacus knows it's suicide. They embrace, brothers who know this might be the last time. You know what comes next. The show knows you know, and it gives you every agonizing second to dread it. The battle is carnage. Crixus fights exactly how he always has. Power, relentlessness, forward, always forward, no retreat, no adaptation. Against one gladiator, that style is dominance. Against a Roman legion, it's a man running out of road and refusing to turn. And that refusal, that beautiful, stubborn, fatal refusal to be anything other than Crixus, is what kills him. Tiberius, Crassus's coward son, drives a spear into Crixus's back from behind. The champion of Capua, killed by a boy too afraid to face him from the front. Rome doesn't give warriors deaths. It gives them efficient deaths, practical deaths, deaths designed to end the problem, not honor the man. Then the head. Crixus's head removed, sent to Spartacus. The head arrives. Spartacus looks down. No scream, no speech. Just the face of his brother, emptied of everything that made it his. And then, Spartacus does something the show has been building toward without you realizing it. He forces captured Romans to fight each other in a makeshift arena, gladiatorial combat, as grief. That scene isn't revenge. It's grief wearing someone else's face. The only moment in the entire series where Spartacus becomes Batiatus, where the man who burned the ludus recreates the exact system he destroyed. He knows it. We know it. Nobody says a word. The cost of Crixus's death isn't just a soldier lost. It's Spartacus's soul, bent, cracked, held together by fury instead of principle. The real Crixus died at Mount Garganus in 72 BC, separated, crushed. Division killed the rebellion before Rome did. Crixus died on a battlefield. But the next death didn't happen on any field. It happened on a cliff. And it broke television. Lucretia, Domina, the woman who survived a rebellion, a slit throat, madness, and every betrayal Rome could manufacture, and chose her own ending with more power than any gladiator ever held. She survives the Blood and Sand massacre, throat cut, left for dead, returns in vengeance appearing broken, mad, lost. But that's the mask. Lucretia is running the longest game in the series. Every act of apparent madness is calculation. She has one goal, and the show hides it until the final 60 seconds of the vengeance finale. Lucretia takes Ilithia's newborn child, cuts it from her body, takes the baby, walks to the cliff's edge, and steps off. Lucretia didn't just end her life. She took a Roman dynasty with her. In a world where women controlled nothing, not their bodies, not their marriages, not their deaths, she made her final act the most devastating power move in the series. No sword required. The show holds on the cliff edge. Empty space. Silence where a person stood 2 seconds ago. If this scene was in Breaking Bad, it would be on every greatest moments in television list ever compiled. Spartacus put it in a Tuesday night finale on Starz, and the world barely noticed. That says more about how we treat this show than it says about the scene. Ilithia is destroyed, the Glaber dynasty ends, and Lucretia, manipulator, murderer, survivor, became the most powerful person in the series in her last breath. Not through violence, through finality. Lucretia chose her death. The next man didn't get that choice, but found something beyond the horror. And after him, the one I've been building toward this entire time, Spartacus, the god of the arena, the most naturally gifted fighter the show ever produced, and a man who spent his entire life running from the one thing he couldn't outfight, himself. He earned the rudis, freedom, and walked straight into a wasteland of wine, wandering, and self-destruction. Freedom meant living with what he'd done. The arena gave him purpose. Freedom replaced it with guilt and the road. He comes back to the rebellion not because he believes in the cause. He comes back because he's finally willing to risk caring about people one more time, and that willingness is what makes everything that follows unbearable. The final battle, War of the Damned. Gannicus fights with that terrifying grace the show gave only to him. A man who fights like art because he stopped caring whether he survives. No tension, no fear. When you've already accepted death, combat becomes something almost beautiful. He's captured, taken by Rome, crucified, nails through wrists, wood, sun, hung along the road like a warning, one body among thousands. The real Spartacus rebellion ended with 6,000 captured rebels crucified along the Appian Way, 200 kilometers of dying men lining the road to Rome. That horror wasn't invented for television. Rome did it first. But tonight gives Gannicus something history didn't. As he hangs dying, Gannicus sees them. Oenomaus, Melita, waiting, smiling, nails, wood, sun, pain fading. And then, her face, his brother's hand. The arena couldn't give him this. Freedom couldn't give him this. Only death could. That image, Gannicus on the cross, eyes glassing over but smiling, is the most brutal and most beautiful frame Spartacus ever created. He dies in agony. He dies at peace. Both, in the same breath. Rome's message: this is what happens to slaves who refuse their place. But the smile on Gannicus's face is his reply. You can nail me to wood, but you can't touch what I'm going home to. Gannicus died with peace on his face. But the last death on this list? There is no peace. There is only the machine. And the machine works perfectly. Varro. Not a champion. Not a legend. Not even a gladiator by choice. A man who sold himself to the arena because his family had debts, and selling your body to Rome was cheaper than watching your wife and son starve. That's not a backstory. That's an economic system working exactly as intended. I need you to remember who this man was before I tell you how he died, because if you don't feel it, none of this lands. Varro is the warm center of Blood and Sand's first half. The guy who makes jokes in the ludus when everyone else is posturing. The guy who talks to Spartacus like a human being, not a rival, not a commodity, just a person. While everyone else is scheming or performing, Varro is the one man in that building who acts like a friend. Because he is one. The only real one Spartacus has. He fights for his wife, his son, the debt that swallowed his family. Every time Varro walks onto the sand, he's not fighting for glory. He's fighting for people he might never see again, doing the only math Rome left him. Your body is worth money, so spend it. In Spartacus, decency is not armor, it's a target. Every kind moment between Varro and Spartacus, every joke, every shared drink, every quiet conversation after a fight, is the show letting you love him so the loss means something. You want to believe the system has a limit. It doesn't. Here's how it works. Numerius, a Roman teenager, celebrating his birthday at the games. He's given the power to decide a gladiator's fate. Thumbs up or thumbs down. A child, drunk on the casual power Rome hands its sons over the lives of other human beings. He signals death. For Varro. Not because Varro fought badly, not because Varro offended anyone. Because a teenager wanted to see something exciting at his birthday party. That's the reason. A boy wanted entertainment, and a man's life was the cheapest toy in the room. And Spartacus is the one holding the sword. Think about what tonight built. Every layer is worse than the last. It's not an enemy killing Varro. It's his best friend. It's not a general giving the order. It's a child. It's not a battlefield. It's a birthday party. It's not punishment. It's entertainment. The cruelty was distributed so cleanly that everyone's hands are clean, and Varro is still dead. Spartacus pushes the blade in. Slowly, the camera holds on both their faces. It doesn't look away. It makes you watch. Varro doesn't blame him, doesn't curse, doesn't scream. The look on his face, not anger, not betrayal, acceptance. One man telling another, without a word, that he knows. That the system did this, not him. That it's okay. It's not okay. But Varro says it with his eyes because that's who he is. Kind, even at the end. Generous, even with his last breath. And that kindness in the face of the most designed cruelty the show ever built, is what makes this the most brutal death in Spartacus. Not the blood, the goodness it extinguished. I don't care how many times I watch this show, Varro's death still hits different, every single time. This is the moment Spartacus stops being a gladiator and becomes a revolutionary, not Sura's death. He was already carrying that. Varro's death is what proves Rome isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed. The arena doesn't malfunction when it forces a friend to kill a friend for a teenager's birthday. That is the function. Not justice, not sport, control. Varro's death didn't just remove a character. It removed Spartacus's last reason to play by Rome's rules. That's the real brutality of Spartacus. Never the blood, always the design, always the machine, and always the cost of caring about someone inside it.